Who says the bye week can't be fun? Miami already has a new verbal commit. It was a flip. And what happens next?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County on Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this episode of Locked On Canes, we will take an early advanced look after the bye week because Miami's going to take on, I don't care that they've lost 2 straight games. Louisville is a really tough opponent with a very good offense. We're going to take a look at the Cardinals. We're going to talk about the present and future of the Miami Hurricanes quarterback room and why quarterbacks have become such a hot button topic again. Miami just landed another wide receiver. The Hurricanes flipped Joshua Moore from his Florida pledge. He's now pledged to the Miami Hurricanes, class of 2025. Excellent receiver from West Broward, 4 stars. And to help us break down Josh Moore and so much more, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Larry Bluestein on with us. Blue, I would imagine, knowing you've probably been watching Josh Moore since he was playing, youth football, flag, Pop Warner. What's the scouting report on Miami's newest commit?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Alex, thanks for having us. And not only that, you take a look at a kid like Josh Moore, who we've been talking about for 3 years, before he was ever, real officially on the radar. Here's a kid you got to understand. He had a ton of schools, St. Thomas, American Heritage, everybody in the world trying to pry him loose over the last couple of years. And he's felt his commitment to Coach McCartney so much because, what he's done for him and traveled around and brought him different places and, given him an opportunity to play against elite football teams, this year, Camden County in Georgia, last year, Mainland and Daytona Beach. So, it's given him an opportunity to, be that loyal guy because most kids, and especially in this landscape, are gone. What do you want to play for West Broward? And, but you got to give them credit. They made the playoffs last year and they also won the district this year. They're off to a really, really good start as well. And here's a kid and I've said this from the beginning. I thought, they talk about Dallas Wilson, they talk about all these other receivers in this class, and I thought he was right up there. First of all, at 6'4". What happens sometimes when you're an elite receiver or an elite player, as Jonathan Vilma told me, that the one thing that he had to work on when he came out of high school was tackling, because all he did was push kids down, in high school. Well, Josh Moore, when you take a look at a lot of these people who have an opportunity to be pretty special, he runs patterns. He's a really good route runner. And that's what separates him, because you have a lot of these guys who are an elite receivers who probably pretty much, well, I'll beat that kid and I'll beat that kid. It doesn't matter how I run the route, it's sort of like that street football mentality, hit me at the taillights of the Volvo, I'll be right there, that type of thing. But this is somebody who really understands the position, is really played well. He's a physical guy. He's a mismatch for a lot of people, and this is a perfect guy to get in. And we've said this from the beginning. I thought that he was one of the probably the most overlooked prospects in the country when it comes to receivers, because people were just taking him for granted and not really watching him play and not seeing what he brings to the table as a teammate and as a leader. And a lot of people don't get a chance to see that.
Something I want to add, because I did Blue an instant reaction episode last night when Josh Moore committed, and someone that I forgot to give credit, Kevin Beard, Miami's wide receivers coach. And I especially want to give KB some credit because, this is just the nature of college football fans. So I'm not going to put this on Miami fans. Of course, I am a Miami fan, but when Malachi Tony decommitted last week, Miami only had one receiver currently locked in, Dalen Upshaw. I saw a lot of these knee-jerk reactions on social media like, what is Kevin Beard doing? Did he forget how to recruit? We're not going to get any wide receivers in this class. And then he goes out and he flips Josh Moore. And Blue, you know better than anyone because, you're out there at all these games. You're scouting players. I mean, Coach Kevin Beard, who, by the way, let's not forget the elite wide receiver class that he hauled in just a year ago. And now he goes out there and he flips Joshua Moore. Talk about the work that KB puts in on the trail.
Yeah, he's a gem, and I've had the pleasure of watching him since he was Ryan Schneider's wide receiver at Plantation High School back in the day. And just a class individual, always has been, never cuts anybody down, never says a negative word, always positive. And that's why the kids gravitate towards him and the coaches as well as the parents. He's a great recruiter in the fact that he'll tell you a lot of things, and here's a guy that when everybody was raving about Ray, last year when he came to the school, he's this and he's going to be this and that. Kevin Beard and I talked, and he said to me, he's got a lot to learn. And, that kind of said, wow, most coaches wouldn't say something like that, but he says he's got to understand this is not high school anymore and it's college, and he's going to have to do the little things to become special. And, you got to admire somebody who really tells it like it is, and he doesn't sugarcoat anything. But the kids love him because of that fact, because he works hard, he works them hard, he works hard himself. He's a perfect Mario Cristobal guy where he's going to be in that office, around day, working on recruits, checking out film, as well as looking at his own receivers. And, I'm sure he studies, practice film as much as anybody does, because he wants to make sure that he gets the ultimate out of his receivers. So you're 100% correct. He's the guy that should get a lot of the credit. He was voted as one of the top recruiters in the country for a good reason, because of the fact that he's a genuine person, and he wants to elevate you as a player.
So if we look at what Miami currently has committed in the wide receiver class for 2025, and we'll see if anybody else hops in, Blue, because it's going to be a long way to go till National Signing Day. I know Miami still hasn't given up on someone like Dallas Wilson. But having now Josh Moore and Dalen Upshaw from Alabama currently committed in the class. Talk a little bit about Upshaw and how maybe he and Josh Moore, very, very different body types, different types of players, how they complement one another.
Yeah, well, we're more 6'4", over 200 pounds. Here's a guy, that comes in about 6 foot and about 180. He's an outstanding football player. I mean, tremendous. I mean, Phoenix City is one of the best programs, in the country. I was really looking forward to watching him against IMG, but that game was canceled because obviously the weather at the time. Somebody that Auburn really, really loved. There's a lot of programs that went after him. He's quick. He's an athletic guy. He's certainly somebody who, fits the bill of what Miami's trying to do. He's got that, from a wide open offense. He's used to that as well. But he's one of those guys, he makes the plays. And as you could see, last year there was a lot of iffies in the Miami, the receiver room. But right now it's shaping up, not only now, but in the future with the addition of those two, what they have now in that room. I mean, they're loaded up. They got some really good X's, and they got also, the slot kids. So they're going to be really, really good. And I think he and Joshua Moore really bring, a lot of pluses to the program as far as, going to get in see, that's the thing too, when a lot of these kids see the Miami games and see kids who are freshmen and getting into the mix, that's important. And the average person doesn't understand that. I mean, this isn't the old days where you just redshirting a kid to redshirt them. I mean, Miami needs the arsenal from every position. And certainly when you see, guys that they recruited in that 2024 class who are on the field already, and it doesn't matter what position, but certainly the wide receiver position where you've seen quite a few of them so far. So it's, getting those two guys would be really, important for the program as they move forward and as they move in that direction.
Well, speaking of freshmen getting playing time, here's what I want to talk about here with Larry Bluestein is we've had some freshmen on the team right now, already making an impact, like Blue said, but who do we need to see more of after the bye week for the Miami Hurricanes? We're also going to take a look at the present and future of Miami's quarterback room. We're going to talk about the challenge coming up after the bye week against Louisville. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. I mean, guys, we've been making money, having a great time. We'll see next week what the line looks like, but I'm seeing Miami potentially 1-point underdogs on the road against Louisville. That could obviously change depending on how Louisville plays this weekend against Virginia. I expect the Cardinals to win that game and end their 2-game losing streak. So we'll be monitoring Miami's number against Louisville after the bye week. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have the man, Larry Bluestein, with us, who has been covering South Florida high school, college, professional sports for so long, does an awesome job with Prep Red Zone Florida, 560 WQAM, the Six Ring Canes podcast. The man is everywhere all at once, and it's amazing. Now, Blue, you mentioned previously that there have been a lot of true freshmen from that top 5 class of 2024 who are getting playing time. Is there anybody you'd like to see more of during the second half of the season?
Well, obviously, somebody who I've been high on since he came out, and I think you and I talked about him when he was being recruited out of Las Vegas, is Elija Lofton.
Yeah,
big time kid. But you can't. Here's the thing too: the tight ends are becoming more, prevalent in the offense this year. Obviously, we've been awaiting Arroyo ever since he got here, and Will Mallory, was ahead of him, and he's finally come in. The kid Williams has really done a tremendous job, but Elija adds a dimension because he's just a gifted athlete. He may be as gifted an athlete as anybody on this football team. And I'm not talking about Chris Johnson's speed. I'm just talking about somebody who could line up at 4 or 5 different positions, from H-back to tight end. Remember in the state championship game just last year for Las Vegas against Liberty High School, he ran one, passed one, caught one, and picked one off for a touchdown. So, here's a guy who's versatile. He's played that D-end outside linebacker position. He's played that, like a slot receiver position. He's played tight end. He's played H-back. He's played running back. And if you remember during the spring, he even had a game where, a lot of the running backs were banged up. So he played it in a scrimmage and went over 100 yards against that good defense. So, yeah, here's a guy that I would like to see. And, we saw, surprise kids like O.J. Frederick, who we never thought would be in the mix so often. And he was in the starting lineup at a University of Florida game from the beginning. A lot of these kids are getting an opportunity. And you look, in the games, in games that are, important, like the last 2 against Virginia Tech and Cal, you saw a freshman in there. And that's the belief that Mario Cristobal has always had, that if you're wearing a uniform, you're going to get an opportunity to play because we recruited you because you can play, not just because you can sit on the bench. And there's a lot of kids, like Lyle from day one, had an opportunity. And Miami's running game has become deeper now, with Martinez, who's, and a lot of people were waiting for Martinez. Oh my gosh, look what he did at Oregon. He's just a different back. He's more of a functional back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can, run from the line of scrimmage, but he also can block, and his experience is what is important. But getting an opportunity to see a lot of these freshmen get into the lineup, as I said before, it's huge in recruiting too, because when these kids are especially in the game in a couple of weeks at Hard Rock Stadium when they play Florida State, there's going to be a ton of kids there, and they're going to get an opportunity to see a lot of these guys that they played against last year over the net or played with, and they're saying, oh my gosh, look, I mean, these kids are, these guys are in the game, I mean, and here I played against them last year. So it's vital for these freshmen to, and it's not just here, it's everywhere that freshmen, you look at, the kid Williams, who's 17 years old at Alabama, getting an opportunity to star, and Joseph and Jeremiah, Smith at Ohio State is one of the best. And, I was just looking at some of the top rated freshmen. They had like an early season on the top freshman, and Elija Lofton was on that list, and rightfully so, because he's a guy that Miami got in, coveted. A lot of schools on the West Coast, USC, UCLA, wanted him, Oregon, all these programs, but he had the belief system after talking, to another former Hurricane who played tight end and came from Bishop Gorman a few years ago, and certainly an opportunity to listen to somebody that was your mentor and that you looked up to. And that's what college recruiting has come down to, Alex. There's a lot of people, Brevin Jordan, who's I was thinking of.
Yeah.
But that's what college recruiting is coming down to. I mean, it's not the weight rooms, it's not the stadiums with 1 million people in it. It's if you could play, because that's the whole thing. You can go to all these great schools that draw a lot and have great attendance and this and that, but if you're not on the field, you want to play. And that's what a lot of these guys are looking at, that especially with this portal, because you look at, Barrow and Barron and these guys up front. I mean, they're basically one-year guys. But the very fact, and I've said this all along, when somebody will ask me, well, how come Florida State's dropped off? Well, the reason why is they did tremendous in the portal over the last couple of years, but they didn't recruit real well. That's not the case here. Miami's recruited extremely well. You get guys like Ruben Bain to show you that. And you got, Lyle, who they recruited, and Emory Williams, who they recruited, in the secondary, and a linebacking core of Wesley Basaint, and certainly Popo, Gary, who's done a tremendous job. So that's the difference, So if Miami next year doesn't hit on all these portal kids, they'll at least have kids who have been understudies for these guys and learned a lot, from the Messidors and people like that who have come in with some experience. And that's the difference. And that's an important part of recruiting in these days, is to not only hit good in the portal, but also have really good recruiting as well. And that's a balance that I think is a lost art, but it has to come back.
Yeah, and when it comes to both hitting and recruiting and hitting in the portal, I mean, Miami probably hit bigger in the portal with Cam Ward than any other team hit in the portal this year. And let's talk a little bit about him, Blue, because I value your perspective so much, because Ward has been one of the best stories in college football. He's putting up his best career numbers. He's on track to shatter Miami's single season passing record set by Bernie Kosar in the 80s. He's on track to set the new single season touchdown record set by Steve Walsh at 29 touchdowns. Ward, might have those records by Halloween, if not before. But, you've been watching Hurricanes football even since before the Schnellenberger days. So I know he's only 6 games into his, 1-year Miami career, but where are you kind of putting Ward when it comes to all-time Miami quarterbacks?
Yeah, you look at him, and he's just a different category. I mean, you look at the Dorseys, and you look at the Jim Kellys, and everybody, and even back into the 70s with a lot of the, like the Kerry Bakers and people that they had back in the 60s. And they were really good leaders, and they were really productive quarterbacks, but they weren't dynamic like this. I don't think Miami's ever had a quarterback this dynamic. And you mentioned 6 games. Look, he's turned the world on the side just on what he's done. And here's the great thing about him too: as good as he is, and as much of a leader and effective he is, and somebody that you can count on, even if you're down by 25 points, that you're going to still be in the game. But the fact is he knows that he makes mistakes. And, in the post-game interviews or wherever, he says that's the one thing that he's got to cut down on, because, when you take chances and you try to, maybe put the ball in there with 3 defenders around there, you're not always going to win. And I think he has to understand that, what he does as an improvising freelancing quarterback, like Pat Mahomes, is great, because that flipping the ball at the last second out to a tight end, or getting that ball like he did, sort of like a la Tim Tebow, like a little jump pass to Arroyo that scored the game-winning touchdown. And those are fine. He just wants to cut down, and I'm sure that Dawson and Coach Cristobal want to do the same thing. Is this, use better judgment. When, don't put yourself in a hole, because if you're throwing interceptions when you're moving in for a touchdown, like he did against Virginia Tech, that kind of hurts him. He's been overcoming. There's a lot of things that you can overcome when you have this much talent, but there's going to be a time where, you're not going to be able to do this. So don't put yourself in the hole, so early. And I think he understands that. And that's listen, he's been a blessing beyond blessings for Miami. It's just that from day one, and everybody had said, this guy, and you look at Restrepo and all these guys like that, and they'll always tell you the same thing. They go, this guy's a magician, and I love him, and he's a great quarterback. But at the same time, when he has to play within himself sometimes. When he makes those improvising things, that's fun. Yeah, but when he's just a straight quarterback who's trying to give you a lead early on, he's got to use better judgment. And like I said, it's nothing that I'm saying. He says it himself. So that's what separates him, because not only is he a great quarterback and a dynamic, personality and averaging over 400 yards a game, but he also understands that he has faults, and those faults, could prevent him, from a higher draft slotting in the NFL draft next year. And that's the important thing, that he's no doubt a first-round draft pick. He's just as effective as Shador, and effective as what's his name up at Georgia. So Beck. Beck. So, but he sees, this is the one thing that he sees that maybe that Shador Sanders doesn't see, or Beck doesn't see. He sees the faults that he has too, and he understands that, and that's something that a professional coach, and even a college coach, admires. And I think that, and even he said, I think the other day, that this is not an off week for us. This is a week for us to assess what has happened and what we have to do, not to have to come from 25 down or 20 or 18 down to win games. We got to put ourselves in a position from the beginning. And as you mentioned, coming up, they've got a really, really tough road game against Louisville, who, as you said, lost a couple, but at the same time possesses probably one of the best offensive minds in the country by far. Braum knows his stuff. He's an elite type of coach, and he calls all that offense. So this is going to be a challenge, but certainly when you have a 6-0 team that understands that the way they got there hasn't really been easy, that's the best thing. It's not taking for granted for what you have.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about Louisville, and also a little bit about what the quarterback room is going to look like after Ward, because we only have Cam Ward for this one season, which, makes a lot of people wonder what's it going to be like next year. My friends, you want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. There's so many reasons why GameTime is the only ticket app that I use. I'm getting the best deals, especially the closer you get to puck drop, first pitch, kickoff, comedy shows, musical theater. You can get anything, concerts. GameTime has it all, my friends. And I'm looking at events coming up in the area. Florida State is going to be in Miami on October 26th for a huge game. I'm looking at tickets right now starting at $112. We'll keep our eyes on that for the next couple of weeks. I'm looking at New England Patriots at Miami Dolphins tickets for next month, starting at $71. Guys, you need to check out the deals at GameTime. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the all-in pricing feature on GameTime that shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And I love to get a panoramic view from my seat in the app before I buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. We got the man Larry Bluestein with us on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. All right, so Blue, I already see some people, we're only halfway through the season, but I get all these questions about, well, who's going to be the quarterback next year after Cam Ward moves on to the NFL? So I see and hear really good things about the way Emory Williams is developing. Miami also has Judd Anderson with a lot of talent and a strong arm right now as a true freshman. Miami has Luke Nickel coming in the class of 2025, and he's having a superb high school season at Milton in Georgia. Miami has Darian Coleman, who's having a great season at Orlando Jones, verbally committed for the class of 2026. So I would say, Blue, and not to say anybody is Cam Ward 2.0, because he's just different. He's generational. But I think Miami looks like they're going to be in pretty good shape quarterback room in the future. So do you like the room that Miami's going to have over the next couple of years? Do you even think they might go into the transfer portal and grab somebody else?
Yeah, well, to answer your question, yeah, it's going to shape up to be a tremendous quarterback room. As you mentioned, Judd Anderson is a guy that a lot of people may have taken for granted. You were the first one who really actually jumped on him and said, "Hey, wait a minute, this kid's a prospect." And I remember you saying that, and that's a credit to you. And not only that, you take a look at somebody like a Luke Nickel that we've seen quite a few times over the last couple of years. Whether it be playing for Milton or during the summer, when he played 7-on-7. This kid is intelligent. He's stayed with Miami from the beginning, because I could tell you this, Ole Miss and Georgia and other programs have seen exactly, what Miami's seen in him, and have obviously tried to pry him away. But I'll tell you what, and I'm not going to, toot any horns or anything, but I've been on Emory Williams since day one. And I told Frank Pons, who's now the offensive coordinator at Appalachian State, that there's a kid that I saw when I was at the Florida State camp. He's in 10th grade at the time, and this guy made every throw. And I was wondering who he was, and I was asking one of the coaches at FSU, didn't know, so I went over and asked and introduced myself. And then I, found out who he was, and then I called, a good friend of ours, Ty Wise, who used to play at the University of Miami back in the day, who coaches up in that area, and I know he's got his son who Miami would love to have for the 26th class.
Bring him on down, Ty.
And I had asked him, I says, I know you're in that area and you see Milton, which is certainly in that area. And he told me the truth. He said, we played against him. I wasn't impressed. That's what he said. And he says he just didn't seem like he had that leadership. He didn't have that, this or that. And that was his sophomore year. And then after his junior year, I remember Ty calling me back. He goes, we talked about the kid from Milton. He goes, he's the dude now. And that's when I kind of figured, I said, wow, and Miami was on him first, and that was it. Ever after that, Auburn got on him, and Florida State and all these other programs. But I think he saw the fact that Miami had that genuine love for him from the beginning. And that's why it's so essential. All these people say, oh, well, I don't care about a 27 kid who's a sophomore or a 26 kid who's a junior. I'm thinking about now. But you can't just think about now, because if you show a kid, that much love at the beginning and say, you know what, we recognize what you're going to be, there's a belief system, and it happens more times than not. A kid will blow up and then he'll forget about you, but that doesn't happen that often. And Emory was certainly that guy. And I'm telling you, Alex, he belongs in this system. This is a good looking kid. He throws a great ball. He's got good leadership. But not only that, he's a team kid. Everybody loves him, because he's a team guy. Everybody could, he's been there a couple of years now, and he could be disgruntled and say, you know what, they throw this guy in front of me, they throw that guy in front of me, but not him, because he knows it's a process. And if you're going to be a great football player, look at teams like Alabama or Ohio State. Ohio State's top quarterback is now at Syracuse and McCord. So you never know what's going to happen, especially with the portal. But I think he's got a good opportunity. He and Judd have tremendous opportunities with two really good quarterbacks coming in, next year with Luke Nickel and then Darian Coleman the following year. So, yeah, and to answer your question, they could add a portal kid. They have Paffenbarger on the roster too, but But they could add a portal guy for next year, maybe it's not going to cost them anything. It's just going to be a roster spot that maybe they could use if it's, they're not going to find another Cam Ward. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to find a quarterback like him, but they're going to find somebody if they need. If not, and they feel comfortable with what they have, they'll go with it. And I think they're in great shape. And I think that, with Dawson's leadership and his understanding of the quarterback position, and that's the big thing when your offensive coordinator is a quarterback guy. That's just a huge plus. And you don't have to go through two chains of command. You have your own guy. And I remember I told you the story when they had Darian Coleman in during the spring and he was throwing, and I had asked Dawson, I said, what do you think about him? He goes, he's what we need. And obviously he, Nickel, Anderson, and Coleman are the guys for the future. So, yeah, I think the quarterback room is going to be in great shape.
Blue, after the bye week, Miami is going to be on the road at Louisville for a noon game. I don't think anyone can stop Miami's offense, Louisville included, but they've got a tremendous offense. Blue would be probably the best offense Miami has faced so far this season. Do you think Miami is going to be able to tweak and fix their coverages and make them a little bit more consistent? Because again, I think Miami can score on anybody, Louisville included, but what's your early look at that game? And is Miami's defense going to be up for the challenge?
Yeah, they have no choice. They've got to come up with a way to stop them. And, they've got the weapons. And obviously, as I said before, somebody like Coach Brahm, who's a really great offensive mind, and he knows what to do. And then you got Chaney, who's there. And, he's been very vital. Freshman Isaac Brown from Homestead has done a tremendous job for him. They've got a lot of really good talent on the team, and Miami's got to limit them offensively, and they've got to come up with the big plays. And the one positive is their quarterback is more of a drop back guy, and that's good for Miami because then you could send the pass rush. Now, with the exception maybe last week of Mendoza, who did some really good things, and there's no doubt he played a great game for Cal, but he at least got out of the pocket a little bit. This is where Miami thrived. You look back in the Florida A&M game and the Ball State game and the Florida game, you had quarterbacks who weren't as fleet-footed. And Louisville's got a quarterback who's not a big-time runner. He can, but he's not a big, and that's going to play in Miami's advantage. But where you saw with Cal's offensive line did such a tremendous job neutralizing Miami's defensive pass rush. And they've got to make sure that the back end and their linebacker play, which I didn't think was really, really great. And, nothing against Kiko Mawanoa, but he hasn't been the Kiko Mawanoa of last year. It's evident. And he needs to kind of take that leadership and do it again. Wesley was saying the same thing. It's not the front. It's the back end. And it was, to me, the front four were just solid. The linebacker plays got to improve a little bit. And then you'll see the difference in the secondary. It's a good secondary, but the thing is you can't keep leaving them on an island and giving a quarterback, 10 seconds to throw the ball, because I don't care what it is, even if it's an NFL secondary, you're not going to be able to cover for that long. So, yeah, I think the defense, they're going to have to – that front seven is going to really have to get after it and cause a lot of problems and put the pressure on, so the secondary won't be, just a complete target all the time. Because if you saw in the game against California, especially early on, Mendoza could have read a book back there because he had a lot of time. So that's important. They're going to have to, Landry's going to have to dial up some schemes and, yeah, we'll see. It's like you said, this is one of the games that I said at the beginning of the year that, could be a tough assignment for Miami. But the best thing, too, is having it at a noon game. People don't realize now you're not giving all those rowdy fans an opportunity to tailgate and party all day. And I think it might play into Miami's hands a little bit to get that early afternoon game. And and I would suspect the following week, even though I'd like to see it at a night game because more recruits would come out, but Florida State has a chance to come in 1-6, and I don't think the network's going to really, favor spotlighting a game like that. But you never know, because that has a rich tradition, and a lot of history. And it's always been one of those throw out the type of, the records and then play the game like Oklahoma, Texas type game.
Absolutely. Well, Blue, before we run, I want to first of all say, hope everyone is preparing their homes here in the state of Florida and getting ready for Milton. I know we have people all over the country, certainly all over the state listening. So please be prepared.
Yes.
And if you do get a chance, on your Odyssey app or on your radio tonight, Blue, you're going to be on WQAM tonight. Let people know what they can hear, because I've said it before, I'll say it again. You have the most informative radio show in the country.
Well, it just so happens that we have Josh Moore's head coach on, Brian McCartney.
How about that?
Yeah. So in fact, I booked him before I knew that Josh was going to make the flip, but we have him on. We'll talk to Anthony Walker Sr. His son is a linebacker with the Dolphins. He used to play at Monsignor Pace, and he's done a tremendous job. We'll talk a little University of Miami with Adam Lichtenstein from the South Florida Sun Sentinel is going to join us a little bit. Talk a little bit of Florida Gators with Kevin Brockway. The Gators are starting in their huge stretch now where it's like a huge gauntlet as well. And then we'll check in with a couple of local players as well. So it's going to be a real nice show. We go 8 to 10 right after Hurricane Hotline with Joe Zagacki and Don Bailey Jr. So it's going to be nice. And let me just get back on top of what you were saying about I went through my entire phone book yesterday, calling, all these coaches and players and parents that I've met, in the Tampa Bay area and throughout Central Florida, and just checking on them and told them that we're all thinking about them and everything. And we know as well what that feeling is like being here in South Florida, and it is really, this whole week has kind of been a wash in many ways. The high school football schedule, which obviously this happened because there's a Jewish holiday Friday, so there was no games on Friday. Everything was on Thursday, which now has been called off. And then Saturday there's, so it'll be a full Monday next week, Monday and Tuesday, because all these games statewide that are being missed this week are all mainly district games, and they have to be played.
Yeah, no doubts. Everyone, please stay safe. Thank you so much to Larry Bluestein for joining us at Prep Red Zone FL on X. Make sure you check him out. Blue, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you guys again on another episode of Locked On Canes. Make sure you're checking out Locked On ACC as well, because Kenton Gibbs and I work really hard to bring you guys awesome content there. We'll talk to you next time on another episode right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.